I'm Chris Beauchamp, Chief Market Analyst at IG, and over the years I've read a number of books that have been really helpful for learning about investing and trading, and we're going to talk about some of those today. The first one I want to talk about is Ben Graham's Intelligent Investor, which I read quite a long time ago now, but it's regarded really as sort of a foundation, I think, for investment. Ben Graham was a professor at Columbia Business School and famously, of course, taught Warren Buffett when Buffett went to the business school. Ben Graham's idea is all about value investing, looking for companies that trade below their valuation. Now, it's a slightly old-fashioned way to think about investing in a world of Excel and data and Bloomberg terminals that can do a lot of these calculations for you, whereas Ben Graham had to do it by hand, looking for companies that were undervalued. But the principles about looking for companies that aren't too expensive but have good businesses and that you try to buy for a reasonable price still apply to this day. It's a very readable book, actually, particularly in this edition updated by Jason Zweig, because it has a lot of case studies from the modern era and talking about the dangers of chasing hype stocks and IPOs that are too expensive and all this kind of thing. But it is a really, I think, good introduction to the world of markets. It does look a bit thick, but it's actually, I think, a very, very readable book, and that's why it does remain one of those timeless classics of investing. The second one we talk about is Reminiscences of a Stock Operator. It's essentially an autobiography. It's ghost written of the famous trader Jesse Livermore. It's supposed to be a fictional trader. Jesse Livermore isn't named, but he's the subject of the book. Now, he was a trader who started life trading in what they call the bucket shops of Chicago in actually the late 19th century. So it feels like a book from a very long time ago, but it has a lot of timeless lessons. Jesse Livermore made and lost several fortunes over the course of his life, and this book essentially talks about his journey from those bucket shops in Chicago to the New York Stock Exchange and the lessons he learned, the incredible successes he had, and indeed the big losses he suffered along the way. But it has so many timeless bits of investing wisdom, and like all the best books about markets, it is also very, very readable. It will, I think, grab you from the first page about how he learned to follow the price action simply by watching prices going up and down on a chalkboard. This was an era before screens, before computers, before technical analysis, really. But he learned about prices and what his process was. Is a really interesting way, I think, to understand the mechanics of trading and to hopefully learn from a lot of the really big mistakes he did make along the way. The third book about investing that's really interesting is a book called How I Made $2 Million in the Stock Market by a man called Nicolas Darvas. Now, he was a ballet dancer in the 60s, a professional ballet dancer, and he started out investing and made a lot of the mistakes I think people recognize, sort of putting too much money into one investment or selling out too early or holding on to his losers for too long. And the book is very interesting for two reasons. The first is the strategy that he developed after his initial troubles with investing, which are called the Darvas boxes. And this looks at a price action. And when a price is in a period of consolidation, it's moving between a low and a high and continues to bounce around for a while. That's in a box. And when it breaks out of the box is when he would look to actually take a position in that particular market. So he's looking for prices that have been sort of consolidating and moving sideways and then suddenly moving into a period of stronger growth. So he was looking for those companies that had good businesses, but also where the price action was more supportive. And what's really interesting, the second thing about the book that's very interesting is because he was a professional ballet dancer, he was touring all over the globe. And this is in the era before the internet and live prices. And he simply realized that it wasn't good for him, for his investing strategy, to be always in contact with the market and to know what was going on. And he would simply have his broker back in New York send to the next destination where he was performing, wherever it was in the world, a list of the latest prices, and he would update his data from that. So he wasn't looking at prices all the time. He was simply getting them from when he moved from one place to another. And so it's two good lessons about having a strategy that you could follow, but also knowing that sometimes too much data is not helpful and can actually get in the way of good investing. It can make you overreact and make too many decisions about changing which investments you have, rather than holding on to those for the longer term to really get those bigger returns. And the final book I want to talk about that I found really interesting when learning about trading and investing is called What I Learned Losing $1 Million by Jim Poole. Most investment books you see talk about how to make money. This one talked about this guy's journey, Jim Poole, from being a broker in the rural US to moving to the Chicago Mercantile Exchange. He had this incredible run of success and he made lots of money. He became really famous. He got a seat on the Chicago Mercantile Exchange board. He was the youngest to ever do so. And then he lost it all in a very large trade in soybeans. And his story going from this period of success to this period of failure and how he learned and moved on from that is, I think, very important for investors because it tells you how to deal with loss. And that's a really important lesson to learn when you're investing and when you're trading. You will always have losses along the way. Everyone has losses, but it's how you deal with them, how you make sure that you don't risk too much on any one investment or on any one trade, and how you're prepared to cut your losses when markets move against you. You should always trade with a stop loss. And like all good investment books, it is very readable. You can just get stuck into it about his story from how he did well at university by making the right kind of connections, how he did well in the army, how he then translated those skills into his business life and his success trading commodities, lumber and soybeans. And then this big trade that he was convinced would finally make him vast amounts of money. And in the end, it ended up costing him and indeed quite a lot of other people a lot of money, indeed $1 million, which in the 60s and 70s was a lot of money. And it's a good book for learning about the important element of learning how to take losses as well as dealing with those investments that do go well.